decathlon. This is the practice test for the algebra or for the math portion of the academic decathlon. So this is math study guide practice test. So question number 1 says write in exponential form the fifth root of the square root of x. So we need to convert that from radical form to exponential form. So we know that the fifth root of something would be written that something to the 1/5. And so we have the square root of x to the 1/5. And we know that the square root of, well, let's do this. That can be written like this. So, and then we know the square root can be x to the 1/2 to the 1/5, which equals x to the 1/10. So that's going to be D. That's a really good question. When you take a power of a power, we need to remember that we have to multiply those exponents. Fill in the blank. The square root of a perfect cube is always, sometimes, never, impossible to tell, answer not given. So the way that I think of this is if I can prove, it's hard to prove always because you can't come up with every single situation. It is hard to prove never because then you have to prove every single time it doesn't. So the best and easiest one to prove sometimes is if you can prove a yes and if you can prove a no. So we're going to shoot for that as our middle. So if I take the square root of a perfect cube, well, 1 is a perfect cube because we can do it in this manner. So if we simplify 1 to the 3rd, that would be 1, and the square root of 1 produces 1, which is a rational. So this is rational. Oh, I guess this would be no. Answering the question, that's an example of no, it's not irrational. It is rational. And then we can prove that it's yes, it is irrational, is if we take the square root of 2 to the cube, 2 to the 3rd. 2 to the 3rd is 8, and the square root of 8 we know is 2 rad 2, which is irrational. So proving in that manner oftentimes is the easiest way to come up with a solution. Add rad 18 plus 5 rad 128. We cannot combine these radicals, and if we did, if they're like radicals, we would combine their coefficients, but they are not like radicals, so we can't combine them, but we can simplify. So we're going to try to simplify first. Rad 18 can be written as rad 9 rad 2. Rad 9, why did I pick 9 and 2 opposed to 6 and 3? Because 9 is a perfect square, so we can rewrite that. Plus 5 rad 128. 128, so now we're looking for factors of 128 that that are a perfect square, and 64, rad 64 times 2 gives us rad 64 is a perfect square, so we get 5 times 8 times rad 2. That gives us 3 rad 2 plus, we can multiply those two outside, 40 rad 2. Now we have like terms, so we're going to combine their coefficients. So that gives us 43 rad 2. That would be C. We're going to distribute. We have distribution when we, just like any regular distribution. So we'll have rad 2 times, let's keep it in parentheses, rad 5 plus rad 2 times negative 4 rad 2. Important for us to keep this negative with that term. Notice the negative stays with the term. And we distributed the rad 2 times rad 2, and we're multiplying it by the two terms inside. So we couldn't add those together because those were unlike. So rad 2 times rad 5 is rad 10. Rad 2 times negative 4 rad 2 gives us negative 4 times rad 4, right? Rad 2 times rad 2 is rad 4, which is 2. So we get rad 10 minus 8. And typically we put the whole number and then the radical for standard form. That's how I would write it. And we have negative 8, so that would be E. Write the equation of the line through the points. So if we write the equation, we're going to need to find the slope. That's x sub 1, y sub 1. X sub 1 represents the x value in the first point. Y sub 1 represents the y value in the first point. And then we have x sub 2, y sub 2, which are the x and y in the second point. So to find slope, we use the formula y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. That's the difference of y's over the difference of x's. It's the rate of change of y's over the change of x's. So y sub 2 is negative 3 minus y sub 1, which is 5. X sub 2 is 2/5 minus 1/3. So we get negative 8 over, we need common denominators, which will be 15. And that's going to give us 6/15 minus 5/15, which simplifies to negative 8 over 1/15. Now we need to convert that. We can convert that to negative 8 divided by 1/15. We just, instead of writing the division bar, we wrote it in the form of a division sign. There is no division, so we're going to convert it to multiplication by taking the reciprocal of the right term, and negative 8 times 15 gives us negative 120. This is my slope. And let's look at the choices. So this is in standard form. This is in point slope form. This is in slope intercept form, and point slope form. So the first thing I'm going to do, you notice that all except for A has the slope in it. So I know my slope is negative 120. So I'm going to look for a slope of negative 120. No. Yeah, negative 120. So none of these have a slope of negative 120. That's the slope, that's the slope, that's the slope, that's the slope. So to me, none of those. Now don't think the standard form is not in slope intercept form. So I'm going to just take a second and I'm going to take the 120x plus y equals 45 and I'm going to solve it for slope intercept form. So I'll subtract the 120x, isolate y, and now I'm in slope intercept form, and I notice that my slope is the coefficient of x, and that's negative 120. So I know my answer must be A through deduction. So part of taking this assessment is being efficient. So we want to do that. Looking at this problem, we should already know what is going to be needed to do. What we need to do, we're adding variables, we're adding just terms. That positive distributed in there is not going to change it. So I'm just going to write the terms out, and then we're going to combine like terms. So I'm just going to get them out. And now let's find out, does this have a partner? It does. That's a like term, so that's going to make negative 4y to the 5th. Does this have a partner? It does. We're going to combine coefficients, and that's going to be plus 11xy. And then we look at x squared. X squared does have a partner. We're going to combine their coefficients. And now we have to put it in standard form. I'm not sure that they put it in standard form, but every good math teacher is going to expect you to write it in standard form. So that would be your answer. You go alphabetical order. When you have the same alphabet, same variable like x, you go to the one with the highest exponent. So it is B, but I don't like that form. That is not standard form, but it is B just the same. So understand that academic decathlon whoever makes their material probably isn't a math teacher or a consistent math teacher to know all the nuances. No offense, just saying. Write the equation of the parabola through the points. This was crazy. So this was a very interesting thing. So we know a parabola looks like this. And we know that where it crosses the x-axis would be the x-intercepts. And those x-intercepts have a value of 0 for their y. So you'll hear those terms, zeros. And what we also know about parabolas is the distance between 2 points on the same y will have equal distance to an axis of symmetry. So you will have an axis of symmetry between those points. So the distance to this point is going to be equal distance to this point, and this axis of symmetry also has the vertex. The vertex lies on the axis of symmetry. So we can use some of that information when we are provided material or points. Whoa, didn't mean to knock out there. So when we have these 2 points, we know that those are going to be symmetrical. So the distance between 3 and 7 is 4. That's that distance between those 2 points. So if I take half, I know that 2 and 2 will take me to that axis of symmetry. So my axis of symmetry has an x value of 5. And that is helpful and beneficial because your axis of symmetry has a, how do we want to do this? I'm just making sure that I adhere to those things. We don't even use that. Okay, so that could be one way. I'm going to redo that. But that's important information about symmetry and axis of symmetry and your 0 points. I'm going to clone this page and I'm going to restart with, let's clear ink. So we still know that these are our zeros. So if those are our zeros, we have different formats. So this is vertex form, this is 0 form, and that will be really important to understand. So these are going to be my zeros. So if I wanted to find my zeros, I know that it's going to be -3 and it's going to be -7. And then it's going to be my x value times my a value equals my y value. And x and y represent a point. So I have a point. And so I'm going to plug in the 6. I'm going to solve for my a. My x is 1. My x is 1. So this is a nice, elegant, tricky way of finding that a value. So 6 equals a times -2 times -6. 6 equals a times 12. Let's divide by 12. And we get 1/2 equals a. So if I'm going to write my equation, so that's my a value. Your format is y equals a times x minus, I forget. I think it's, I don't think it's h and k are plus or minus. Actually, it might even be minus. I think that I'm not certain on whether that's the form. I do know that in vertex form, it is a times the quantity x minus h quantity squared plus k. That I do know. That is vertex form. I don't know if this is 0 form, but it's something of that nature where h and k are my zeros. But they may use different variables because h is horizontal and k is my vertical shift to my vertex. But so that's good, but it doesn't have my a value of 1/2. So I'm not going to say it's a. My vertex, was I able to find my vertex? I'm not sure if I can find my vertex. but I have it here. Here's my, oh, was it negative? I don't think it was negative. I think it's positive. All right, so that was, no, so it's definitely not that one. Oh, so, all right. So I do use vertex form. So I now know my A value. Let's do this, sorry. This is not a fast one. So we'll use vertex form. I know my A is 1/2. My point, I can go back to my point, 1 minus h squared plus k. No, that still leaves my h and k open. Why do I know my h and k? How did I pick the, oh, axis of symmetry? Oh, because I know what my h is, because of my axis of symmetry. That's how. And I know my point. I'm still using 1, 6. And so now, sorry. So this is my axis of symmetry, or my vertex form. And I knew that my vertex was going to lie on my axis of symmetry, and my axis of symmetry was 5, so I plugged it in, and I get 6 equals 1/2 minus 4 plus, squared, sorry, plus k, don't forget the square. 6 equals 1/2 times 16 plus k. 6 equals 8 plus k minus 8 minus 8, negative 2 equals k. That's my y value for my vertex. And so my vertex was 5, negative 2. That doesn't look like a 5, negative 2. So if I plug it back into x minus h quantity squared plus k, leaving the x and y open this time, I get minus 5. Minus 5 squared minus 2. Let's see if that's one of the choices. Not one of the, oh, here we go, D. So it's D, minus 5 minus 2. Minus 5 minus 2. Whew. Yeah, that ain't easy. Mr. Mack had to definitely look and do a little bit of work. I got actually this one. It was the next one that was a little bit harder for me. There are, if you go online and look and see, there's systems of equations that they do is they create 3 equations and start eliminating. So that's crazy. The path of a toy submarine is graphed and has the following coordinates. At 0 seconds, it's at ground level. So at 0, it's at ground level. That's 0, 0. At 1 second, it is 0.6 inches below ground. So that's going to look like that. And at 7 seconds, it resurfaces. So we have the point 0, 0. We have the point 1, comma, negative 0.6. And then we have the point 7, 0. So we know the axis of symmetry is going to be between these 2 points because they are equal in your y values. So half of that is going to be 3.5, 3.5. So I know my x value for my vertex is going to be 3.5. So that's cool. So we know a couple things. Well, we know that the x value is going to be that. So it could be D. It could be A. And then those are not in standard form. So we'll do that. We'll start with that. So first thing is first. That's just understanding what it is. And I'm going to clone this page again because there's lots of information that we need to derive. And what are we going to use? What are we not going to use? So I have my points. I have 0, 0. I have 1, negative 0.6. And then I have 7, 0. So I have my 2 zeros. So I know that it's going to be y equals a times, well, it's going to be 1, we'll do x minus h, x minus k, and we're going to plug in. So we're going to use this point with our zeros, and we get negative 0.6 equals A, and our x value is 1 minus 0 and 1 minus 7, because we plugged in those two 0 values. Negative 0.6 equals A, that's 1, that's negative 6. Negative 0.6 equals A times negative 6. Let's divide both sides by negative 6, and we get 1/10 equals A. That's my A value, so we're good there. So I know it can be B. Oh, no, that's not my A, sorry. There's my A. Here's my A. So it could easily be that. So let's plug our zeros back in with our A. We have y equals A times x minus 0 and x minus 7. So A is 1/10. So if we simplify that, we get x minus 0 is x times x minus 7. And that is that answer right there. C. This is hard. Look, if this is on a test, I mean, if you understand it, go for it. But if this is on the test, I'm skipping this and coming back to it at the end, because the amount of time that you will place, that you will commit to this, will be way too much compared to a question like this. And this is an interesting question. Here we go. This maybe isn't the best example, because I disagree, or not disagree, but I have questions about how you get that answer or how you derive the answer. So it says, which table could be modeled by an equation in the form of y equals mx plus b? So we're going to look for the slope. They're giving us tables. So our slope, that's plus 5, and this is plus 10, and this is plus 1.6, and this is plus 3.2. So in order to find the slope, what we do is we take the y's over the x's. So we have 1.6 over 5, and we convert that. So if we do 1.6 divided by 5, 1.6 divided by 5, we get 0.32. 0.32. Now, is that slope the same as this? So we have 3.2 divided by 10, which equals 0.32. So that rate of change is consistent. So to me, can I write an equation for it? Absolutely. I'd have to solve for B, but I could solve it by plugging in one of these 3 points. So to me, A is a solution also. Now, do I know what B is by looking at the information? No, I do not. So A is still a possibility. Let's look at B. So B is plus 2. That's plus 2. This is minus 2, and this is plus 2. So the slope between these 2 points is negative 1, but the slope between these points are 1. So B is not an option. 6 to 8 is going to be plus 2. 8 to 12 is going to be plus 4. Just because those are different doesn't make it nonlinear. This is plus 3, and this is plus 7. So the slope of this is 3/2. Slope of this is 7/4. Those are different, so not a linear equation. That is minus 2. That is plus 20. This is plus 3, and this is minus 36. So we have negative 3/2, and we have negative 36/20, which reduces to negative 18/10, negative 9/5. So those slopes are not the same, so not a linear equation. You have plus 3, you have plus 5, you have plus 6, you have plus 10. So you have 6 over 3, which is 2, and you have 10 over 5, which is also 2. Now, the only difference between E and A is I'm also given the y-intercept. I know what my B is. So I could fill in the formula knowing that my slope is 2 and my y-intercept is 1. They say it's e, but I would beg to differ that you can still find, I can model the equation in that form through the information provided in A. So I like A and E. E is better because it provides you the y-intercept. Long-winded, but just saying. Again, this is coming from a math teacher of 32 years. So I know what books want. I know what assessments want. Multiply. We should automatically see that these are conjugates. Conjugates are identical but different signs. So what happens with that is the outside and the inside will be opposite of each other. That's negative 8x and positive 8x. They will cancel. So you'll be left with your firsts times your first, which is x squared, and your last times your last, which is negative 64. So it's going to be A. And you should do that. That you should not be multiplying. You can look at that and understand. You need to recognize conjugates. A baking team is creating a giant pizza. You need to use multiple ovens, but they have different temperature ratings. The shortest oven starts to bake at 1 p.m. and you want all the pizza finished at the same time. If Javi's oven, so Javi's oven will take 3/4 of an hour. So let's just keep track of how long cooking time is 3/4 of an hour to bake 1/2. So it's amount of pizza. So they're going to bake 1/2 of the pizza. Pizza finished the same time. Javi's oven. Maya's oven will take 1/2 hour to bake 1/3 of the pizza. And my pizza, Roberto's pizza, my oven will take an hour to bake and the remainder of the pizza, so whatever pizza is left. So the shortest oven starts to bake at 1 p.m. So which one is the shortest baking time? Mine is the shortest baking time. And if we all want to finish, at the same time, no, if we want to, different temperatures, shortest you need to use multiple baking team. Mine's oven an hour to bake. Your oven, what time should you start to bake and how much of the pizza are you responsible? You need to use multiple, but they have different temperatures, shortest oven, and you want all the pizzas to finish at the same time. So if the shortest starts at 1 and it takes her a half hour, we know that she's going to be done. She's going to be done at 1:30. So if I'm the longest, if I want to be done at 1:30, what time am I going to start? Well, it takes me an hour, so I'm going to have to start at 12:30. Okay, you understand that, how we derive that? That's important. And then we can look at the answers. We don't have to do any further calculations. All this other stuff on the right means nothing because each of these starting times is different. So we actually save time. We're done. We don't have to calculate how much of the pizza. Well, we could have done that and solved for that, but we would have seen that C and we wouldn't have derived because we have identical amounts of pizzas, but we all have unique. Now that's kind of interesting, but you should be able to see that. If you wanted to find out how much, you would add 1/2 plus 3, 1/3 plus my portion should equal 1 whole pizza. We'd find a common denominator of 6, multiply everything by 6. You get 3x plus 2x, 3 plus 2 plus 6x equals 6, and then you solve for x. That's how you get 1/6. Number 12, again, we should recognize that we're just adding terms and the addition sign outside the parentheses, distributing in, is not going to change any of those values. So we can just write them out. And, rad 2x to the third minus 6x plus 7 plus, now rad 18 can be simplified to 3 rad 2x to the third. And we can simplify if we need to simplify. I mean, that can be simplified. So perfect square in the factor, rad 9, rad 2, which becomes 3 rad 2. So we get 3 rad 2 x to the third plus 14x to the fifth minus 12x to the fourth minus 5/3. Now we got to pair them up. So does x to the fifth have a partner? Yep, 14. Look at the coefficients, and that gives me 5x to the fifth. Let's move on to the next one. Does x to the third have a partner? Yes, it does. We have rad 2 plus 3 rad 2 gives us 4 rad 2. Adding radicals do not cancel the radicals. We're just combining their coefficients. Coefficient of 1 and 3 makes 4. Then we're going to see, does this have a partner? It does not. Let's make sure I wrote that correctly. Good, I did. Minus 6x. Does this have a partner? Yes, it does. That is minus 7 minus 5/3. So 5/3 is negative 1 and 2/3. So that'll give me positive 5 and 1/3. And here's the tricky part. Did you notice that we didn't include this one, that didn't have a partner? So it will be important not to lose terms, hence why I notate them, color them, whatever. And now I'm going to put them in standard form. They all have x's, but we're going to do it by powers. 4 rad 2 x to the third minus 6x plus 5 and 1/3 or 16/3. Don't know what they're going to give it as. 5x to the fifth minus 12, 4x minus 6x. So it's going to be E. E. Okay. Which statement is equivalent? This is a little tricky. I mean, they're asking you to FOIL. They're asking you to distribute, double distribute. You assume that's what they're expecting you to do. 2x to the third times 2x to the fifth plus 2x to the third times negative 4 plus 4 times 2x to the fifth plus 4 times negative 4. We have 4x to the eighth. Remember, multiply the coefficients, and then we're going to add their exponents because we're multiplying the bases. Plus minus 8x to the third plus 8x to the fifth minus 16. Let's write it in standard form. That 8x to the fifth is going to go before negative 8x to the third minus 16. And now you would think that that's why they did it. They don't want you to factor, because if they factor, you're getting back to this. But they do want you to factor. It's a very bizarre question. So I'm going to factor out a common factor of 4. 4 goes in each of those coefficients, and there is no variable that is consistent. So I would factor out a 4. You get 8x to the eighth plus 2x to the fifth minus 2x to the third minus 4. And I would look to see, and I think that is B. That is the B value. So we're constantly pushing, efficiency. So what I should recognize is this is the difference of squares. Difference of squares, it's two terms, it's subtraction, and both terms are perfect squares. So difference of squares is always produced by conjugates. Because remember, conjugates don't have an inside that middle term. That's why this is a binomial opposed to a trinomial. So this has to be its opposite, which gets rid of that middle term, and it's x times x, which is x squared, and 9 times negative 9, which gives us negative 81. So that's going to be D. That fast. Absolutely expect you to be able to do that one that fast. Factor. So there are 4 terms. Whenever we see 4 terms, we should think of factor by grouping. We're going to group and group. But before we group, and we could do it that way, but I'm going to put my ABs with my ABs. I'm just going to rewrite this. And it's not that you have to write it in standard form, because factor by grouping sometimes gets a little crazy. And there's different, but you can move the terms around, different combinations. But I'm looking for a common factor, and then I'm going to look for common factors of variables. So I can factor out a 3AB. If I factor that out, I get 4A. and factor out a 3ab from negative 15ab gives me negative 5, and that's it because the ab goes into it. Looking at 8ax minus 10x, I can factor out a 2 and an x, and that gives me 4a minus 5. Did I do it correctly? Yes, I did, because what's inside the parentheses are the same, always in factor by grouping, just like when we do a times c. And then if we take out the 4a, we're left with 3ab plus 2x. 3ab plus 2x is the factor by grouping. And I think that's C. C, yep. Good. Love it. Okay, that's number 15. It's going to be very interesting if I can get through this whole thing before students come in. What should be added to complete the square? Whew. So completing the square, this question mark is a little silly, or it's a little misleading. It's plus what value is going to make this a binomial square? And we know that a is always going to be the square root of this. So we know that this is going to be x. And then what is our b value? Well, how do you get it? Well, you need to take half of that and then square it. And that is how you complete the square. So what is the square root of 6 over 2 quantity squared? Well, you're going to distribute that square. You can distribute exponents into multiplication and division. You cannot distribute exponents into addition and subtraction. So rad 6 squared is 6, 2 squared is 4, and that gives us 3 over 2. So we would add 3 over 2, and that's what we would add to it. Now, if I had to factor this, because it's a binomial square, we would take rad 6 over 2. That would be that factor, but that's not the question they're asking for. What needs to be added to complete the square? And the reason why we have to add that is now it becomes a binomial square and we want to turn it into that. That's beneficial, but the answer is B. Solve. 2 minus x over negative 3 is less than 5. We're going to multiply both sides by negative 3. Whenever we multiply inequalities by a negative, we are going to flip the inequality sign, and we'll subtract 2. We get negative x is greater than negative 17. We again need to divide by a negative. And my final answer, we have to flip again. X is less than 17. So we had to flip that twice. That was where most of you made your mistake, because you had to do it twice. You weren't aware of that. 18, this is good. This is absolute values. We need to remember with absolute values that we need to isolate first. Oh, I hope that sends a chill, because we ran into that problem. So we're going to divide by 2. And isolate the absolute values is what I'm saying. Divide by 2, we get the absolute value of x minus 7 equals 6. Now that we have the absolute value isolated, we know what can be in here. If it was a 6, that would pop out a 6. And if it was a negative 6, that would also pop out a 6. So we would write this statement, negative x minus 7 equals 6, or negative x minus 7 equals negative 6. So I'm going to add 7, negative x equals 13, divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1, x can equal negative 13, or add 7, negative x equals 1, divide by negative 1, x equals negative 1. So those are my two solutions, and we would write them in a solution set in that manner, and we would put it in numerical order. So we get negative 13, positive 1, negative 13, Mr. Mag made a mistake. Oh, negative 13 and negative 1. Hello. It's right there. It said negative 1. Negative 13 and negative 1. Negative, yeah, so D. You should put them in numerical order. That's bad. That's bad practice. Reason why I'm so particular is it doesn't matter where you are in the United States, where you are in the world, you all should have the same answers. You want the same answer in the same order, etc. The uniformity drives that consistency. So let's solve this. You have negative 3 rad 7x plus rad, oh, that x is outside the radical, sorry. And you have rad 7 x squared plus 1 equals 1. These are not like terms. Ooh, that is crazy. I'm going to minus 1 and set it equal to 0. I'm going to put rad 7x squared before 3 rad 7x equals 0, because that's standard form. And now I'm going to look for a common factor. I have a common factor. I have rad x in both of those, or rad 7x. So if I pull out a rad 7x, that's going to leave me with x minus 3, because I'm taking, that's times, 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 and I can pull that out. That equals 0. We know that when two things multiplied equals 0, that one of these two boxes must equal 0. So I'm going to have rad 7x equals 0, and I'm going to have x minus 3 equals 0. I'm going to find what makes that 0. 0 divided by rad 7 is 0. Add 3, and we get x equals 3. So those are my two solutions, 0 and 3. And we look to see 0 and 3 should be E. Checking my answer key, and whoops, skipped a page. 19, 0 and 3, yes. Number 20, evaluate. Oh yeah, how awesome was this? When x equals 2t. So we would say f of 2t, that's what we're plugging in for x. Function should be super easy for you because we know we are very familiar with it. So we're going to plug in 2t where we see x. The important thing here is we're squaring the base. We're not going to square 4. The square is not affecting the 4. It's only affecting x. So that'll give us 4t squared, 2 squared t squared minus 3, and that gives us 16t squared minus 3, which is C. So f of 2t would produce that. For what values of x does h of x equal rad 3 x minus 2 equal 1? So equals, it's saying, hey, this is my output. When does my output of 1? So I'm going to solve for x. What value of x? Solve for x. So I'm going to write 1. Let's substitute the 1. I have rad 3 x minus 2. Let's add 2. We get 3 equals rad 3x. Let's divide by rad 3. Divide by rad 3. Come on. And we get 3 rad 3 equals x, and we have to rationalize that radical. No rads in the denom. No rads in the denominator. I think that was one of the first couple of worksheets. So rationalizing, what's going to get rid of? We're going to multiply it by a value of 1. In equivalency, we're not trying to change the value of this fraction. We just want to change the facade. What's going to get rid of a rad 3 is a rad 3. So if I want it to be value of 1, I got to do rad 3 over rad 3. And now we're going to multiply. We get 3 rad 3, and rad 3 times rad 3, the rad's going to cancel because that's rad 9, which equals 3. And now we can simplify that fraction. So we get rad 3. So when x equals rad 3, when x equals rad 3, that's going to equal 1 in that formula. F of x equals 2 rad x minus 6. Which input below is excluded from the domain? Which one is excluded? Well, so this equals 9, and it's okay to put 9 in there. That's okay. 1/4 isn't a problem in a radical. It's okay to have the square root of 1/4. That would simplify to 1/2, but that doesn't even need to be simplified. It's okay to put 1 in there, square root of 1. It's okay to put 7, even though it's not a perfect square, but that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. This is the only one. We can't have a negative, in a square root. So it would be excluded because we can't have negative. Now, I don't know if excluded is the right answer because we do have imaginary numbers, and that's a little bit later that you'll learn. So, but that's our answer. Solve x squared minus 23 equals 2. We're going to isolate the variable by adding 23. We get x squared equals 25. We're going to take the square root of both sides. When we take the square root of a variable being squared, we're going to introduce plus minus. So we get x equals plus or minus 5. So that kind of means -5, +5. That's a notation. You can have it either way. I always like plus or minus 5, the plus or minus sign. So 23 is going to be C. Halfway done, almost halfway. What are the zeros? So the zeros are the x-intercepts. And what do we know with x-intercepts is y equals 0. So we know that f of x represents the y. So we're going to say the output equals 0. What are my zeros? So what we want to do is we want to factor. So factor, we got to go through this litany of things that I've taught you that you might need to go and look at my other videos. So one is it set equal to 0? Yes, it is. Is it in standard form? Yep. Is there a common factor? No common factor amongst the three terms. Is it a special case? Is it a binomial square? Three terms, perfect square. 39 is not perfect square, so not a binomial square. Is it the difference of square? No, this is 3 terms. Difference of square has 2 terms. So we're going to do step 5, which is a times c. My a is 1 times my c is -39. Multiply those two together and find factors of -39. 1 and 39, 2 no, 3 and 13, 4 no, 5 no. Those are just the factors. I know that this is a product, and since it's negative, I know my signs must be different. And I look here, and the bigger, that's not how you spell bigger, bigger is going to get that sign. So I have my factor pairs, 1 and 39, 3 and 13. The signs are going to be different. One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative, and the bigger is going to get the negative. So the smaller gets the positive. This gives me -38. This gives me -10. Which one equals my middle value? Right here. So I'm going to take these two terms and I'm going to split that middle term up. That -10x is now going to become +3x and -13x minus 39. I'm going to factor by grouping. I have a common factor of x. I get x plus 3. I have a common factor of -13. First term is negative. So I got to factor out a -13, and I get x plus 3. I did it correctly because I have the same two binomials there, x plus 3. And when I factor that out, I'm left with x minus 13. And that product of two things equaling 0, I know either this box must be equal to 0, or I know that this box must be equal to 0. So let's -3. We get x equals -3 is one solution. Let's add 13, and my other x value is 13, so I get -3, 13 as my zeros of the equation. Look at them, they did it. I don't like that, numerical order. And it wants to know the zeros. It wants to know what x is equal. So this is not the solution. Those are not the solution. That's going to produce a binomial or trinomial, excuse me. That'll produce x squared minus 10x. It'll produce that, which is not what they want. They don't want you to factor. They want to know what values would produce a 0 or your x-intercepts. What is the minimum value of the function? So we remember that this is a parabola. The minimum value is the vertex. And we know that vertex lies on the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry formula, oh, well, actually, we don't even have to do the axis of symmetry. We have our zeros. So that means that it's going to cross, it's going to cross, yes, here we go. So we know that that parabola is going to cross at 4 and -5. Because if we set it equal to 0 and solve, set each one, right? You set this equal to 0 because one of these three has to be equal to 0. Well, it's not 2 because 2 is a constant. And then we have 4 and we have -5 would make the zeros. So 4 and 5. Now I want to find the distance between these 2 points, which is 9. And if I half it, that's going to give me 4.5. So I know my axis of symmetry is going to be 4.5 in 4.5 and in 4.5. That axis of symmetry. So I know my x value for my axis of symmetry is going to be -1/2. Okay? Now that's not the answer. It's what's the minimum value. They're looking for the y value. So I want to know, because it's going to lie somewhere here. So I got to plug this value back into this equation and find out what my g of x is, find out what my y is. So I get the equation y equals 2 times, what was it? Do I have it here? Yes, I do. G of x equals 2 times the quantity x minus 4, x plus 5. I'm going to plug in -1/2. So -1/2 plus 5, and we get that value, which is very interesting, -4.5 and 4.5, which y equals, that's 2, that's going to be -9/2 and 9/2, which is going to give me -81/4. Let's cancel that denominator with that, and we get y equals -81/2, which is -40.5. That would be your minimum. That would be your bottom. So that vertex, that low point in the parabola, would be at -1/2, comma, -40.5. That's what those values represent. It's important to understand the concept of what are they asking? What does it mean? Which equation is not equivalent to the others? This was kind of crazy too. I mean, that's just a lot of work. And I was trying to think of how, well, we can simplify some of this. This is y minus 3 equals 4 times the quantity x plus 2. So we kind of see my a is 4, my vertex, that's a point, excuse me, that's my slope, sorry. My slope equals 4, and a point would be -2, 3, because remember it's the opposite of what I see. If we simplify that, that's going to be -4x, that, oh no, not 4, -8x. That base of that exponent is 2. That negative is outside of its minus 2y equals 22. So we can add x, we get -2y equals 8x plus 22, divide by -2, we get y equals -4x minus 11. So different slopes. So that's important, that's interesting. So I know that we're going to see what the rest of it, all right, that is 4. So that has the same slope as a, that has the same slope. This is 4x equals y minus 11. Square root of 121 is 11. Let's add 11. We get y equals 4x plus 11. So that's the same as that. And you get 8x minus 2y equals -22. So let's solve for y again. We're going to minus 8x. We get -2y equals -8x minus 22. Divide by -2. Y equals 4x plus 11. So slope of 4. So I guess once we figured out that a and b were different, and C coincided with A, we pretty much didn't have to go any further. We would know that B is the one that's not the same, has a negative slope. Find the equation of the line parallel, hey, parallel to the point. So let's first and look and see, oh, look, each one is in point slope form. Point slope form is y minus y sub 1 equals m times the quantity x minus x sub 1. So we know the slope is -2. So it can be A, it can be B, can't be C, can't be D, can't be E. So we've eliminated 2. And then if we put the point in there, remember it's the opposite of what we see. So if we have y minus our y sub 1, which is 7, equals the slope is -2, parallel, hence why the slope was the same, x minus my x sub 1, which gives me y minus 7 equals -2 times the quantity x plus 1. And that is going to be A for 27. Oh, I'm definitely not going to make it. It is 2:58. Kids are coming in 5 minutes. And I'm only on 28 of 50. Let's solve this though. We can definitely do this. I like this problem. This is super easy. Let's multiply by 5 first. We get -3 plus w equals 60. Let's add 3, w equals 63. You better have gotten that one right. 29. Let's see how far we can go. All right. Rad 2x, that x is outside. 3 rad 2x equals rad 50. I'm going to simplify that to 5 rad 2 because rad 50 is rad 25 rad 2. Perfect square makes 5 rad 2. We're going to combine their coefficients. That is a 1 because they are like variables and like radicals. So we would get 4 rad 2x equals 5 rad 2. Let's divide by 4 rad 2, divide by 4 rad 2, which leaves us with x. These rads cancel, and you're left with 5/4. 5/4 stinker is a decimal of 1 1/4, or 1.25. All right, 29's done. Solve the system.